I'm currently working in KBS research scientist in blockchain. So previously I was a corporate trainer for Infosys, and my main area of expertise was in machine learning, robotic process automation, and now in blockchain. Okay, so today we are actually going to see, or we are actually trying to understand what exactly is Hyperledger and what are the projects that are incubated under Hyperledger umbrella. Okay, so before I directly jump onto Hyperledger, I will try to give you a very brief idea regarding why we need such a kind of project and what is the peculiarity or what is the advantage that these Hyperledger projects provide to business systems, right? So let me share my screen, and please let me know if you can see. So if you have any questions, or if I ask you some questions, you may reply it using the chat box, right? If everyone starts to speak directly, then that would be a problem. We may not be able to control that behavior. So you may type in the reply or your question in the chat window. So are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So for the past 2 days, I think you might have you were already hearing about all these jargons related to Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all, right? So what would be so based on what you have understood so far, what could be this Hyperledger project, or do you have any guesses on what is the peculiarity regarding Hyperledger projects? I mean, I'm not going into deep technical. I just want to know the basic notion that whether you have some basic idea in your mind, where you can clearly distinguish between something that you have already seen, say Bitcoin or Ethereum, and what you are going to see in Hyperledger projects. Do you have any thoughts or any idea? Okay, so what is a public blockchain? I think at least you might have heard that in the previous sessions, right? Is Bitcoin and Ethereum a private blockchain or a public blockchain?
Bitcoin is a public blockchain.
Okay, so what is the peculiarity? I mean, why should you call that as a public blockchain?
Because anyone can join there and anyone can make a transaction.
Yeah, exactly. So it was nothing but everyone will be able to become a part of that network, and they will be able to start doing or start initiating transactions onto a Bitcoin network, right? But Ethereum is kind of much more advanced in the capabilities compared to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is mainly meant for financial transactions, but Ethereum is actually offers you something more known as decentralized dApps, right? So you might have heard about this dApps in yesterday's session. You have learned about Ethereum, how it is architected, and the way of writing a smart contract in Ethereum, how to deploy that contract and interact with such a contract in Ethereum network, right? So the sole idea here is anyone could actually be a participant or become a part of this network, and they can start initiating transactions onto the network, right? But how does this network comes to an agreement? There should be some way in which this network should come onto an agreement, right? Because since this is a worldwide network, and you know that this is kind of a decentralized one, this is a decentralized one. So how is it going to be? How is it going to come to an agreement regarding the state at a point of time? Actually, I'm just giving you some bits that you have already learned, right? So you might have heard about consensus in the previous sessions. You might have heard about the proof of work protocol and all, right? So you learn that this proof of work protocol, or any other like proof of stake or these kind of protocols will actually ensure the network to reach onto an agreement. So at a point of time, there would be a single state in which everyone will be agreed to, right? So that is the sole idea here. Okay, so you'll be having a public network. Anyone can be a part of that such a network, and whatever that platform offers. Say, for example, in Bitcoin, it offers you to initiate financial transactions. Ethereum offers you much more. You will be able to build decentralized applications on top of it, and you can interact with such applications, right? So what could be the limitations of these public blockchain networks? Do you have any guesses? I mean, what are the limitations that businesses might face when they try to use these kind of uh, public chain for their needs? Or why in the first place the businesses should go for a blockchain based solution? Is there any need? I mean, they already have some systems at their place, right? They already have a set of infrastructure at their end, and why they should go for a blockchain or a DLT based solution in their systems? Do you have any thoughts or any guesses?
I think for business purpose, actually blockchain is more secure and transparent network, and that's why people should choose blockchain because it is more secure and means whatever the transactions done, that transactions cannot be modified. Um,
Exactly.
and I actually don't have idea that
Mhm.
you also ask that what is the limit if we
Yes.
are using public blockchain.
Yes.
Actually, I don't have idea. Actually, I also have that question.
Yeah. So I mean, like let it kind of be an interactive session. Like, what could be the possible limitations? Anyone have any thoughts on what could be the possible limitations in using a public blockchain for when it comes to businesses, right? So do you,
Maybe it requires a huge energy.
yeah. So where do you actually need energy? Do you remember?
Actually there is a lots of programming and mining is there, and multiple persons are accessing that data also, so it may be require energy for or power for that.
Yeah. So I mean, your thoughts are to the point. So what you are trying to say is there is some process called mining, and this
Yes.
actually requires some huge amount of energy, right? In order to
Ye-
do this, there is a huge computational power involved, and that actually requires a huge amount of electricity.
yes, yes.
So that could be one potential problem. So so this mainly comes related to the proof of work protocol. So I think in the first day you might have heard about this consensus protocol, right? I'm not going in depth onto the proof of work protocol because that is not the agenda for today's session. If you have attended a session on consensus protocol, you should have learned about this proof of work protocol. So because of this protocol, the public chain like Bitcoin or Ethereum is actually uh, taking more energy in order to mine. So what does mining means? Mining is nothing but adding a new block onto the chain, right? Am I correct?
Yes, it maybe it is an algorithm, right, sir?
Exactly. So that's an algorithm that is running by the miners, and the miners were actually trying to compete to find to solve a puzzle. So you might have heard about the cryptographic puzzle and all. Let me ask you one thing. Did you have you attended the session on consensus protocol? I think in the first day
Mm,
there was a session on consensus
no,
protocol.
no, sir, no, sir.
Okay, fine. So those who haven't attended that session, I think the people have the recordings available, and you may ask for it. So you could get a better idea about what exactly a consensus protocol is and why it is computationally intensive. Okay, so once you get that notion, you will understand that mining is a very energy consuming process, and adding a new block onto the chain requires a huge amount of energy from the miner side. Okay, so this is one limitation, like you said, this could be one limitation because uh, adding a new block onto the chain requires that much amount of energy, it may not be affordable to the businesses. Okay, this could be one limitation. And even in case of Bitcoin or Ethereum, you might have heard about this metric called TPS. What is TPS?
Transaction processing system?
Transactions, I mean, you can call it as transaction per second. And do you know the TPS of a Bitcoin and Ethereum network?
No.
Somebody have any guesses? So in case of Bitcoin, I think it's roughly around 7. And in case of Ethereum, it might even go to 15 or 20 maybe. So one of the main limitation for, I mean, do you think this is a very good TPS compared to our current systems? I mean, Bitcoin offers you a decentralized way in which you can transact money with anyone, but it only have a throughput of 7 transactions per second. So do you think it is a very good metric when you compare it with some Visa or MasterCard? So basically, even Visa or MasterCard may be able to process at least 2000 transactions per second. Okay, so that is the way in which those systems, that is the capability of those systems that are currently available, right? So in order to compete with such systems, uh, the the current network like the Bitcoin and Ethereum may not be able to have a direct competition with those network, because they have a very limited throughput, and this may not be enough. uh, so that I mean, if you believe like everyone in the world can start using Bitcoin and all, there could be a problem like uh, your transactions may take even uh, hours to get a confirmation. So that could be the problem with public blockchain. So that now you have understood that there is a problem with throughput as well, right? What could be other reasons? There is another most important reason, which is nothing but the privacy, right? So why do you have any thoughts on the privacy aspect of a blockchain? What does it mean, like when I say that businesses can't achieve or have that kind of privacy in a public blockchain? So that is why they are looking for alternatives.
Blockchain maintain privacy, right, sir? Sorry, that means blockchain maintain transparency. So anyone can download or open that files.
So
So maybe,
transparency is there. So what do you mean by transparency? Let me show you a quick example so that you can understand it, right? So
okay.
have you seen that blockchain explorer, Bitcoin blockchain explorer, or this kind of tools?
No, no.
Fine. I mean, I'm just showing you a sample. It is actually available in. I mean, you simply need to do a Google search and you can find this explorer. So I will
Okay.
simply show you a block in a Bitcoin network. So I have searched for the 50th block in the Bitcoin network, right? A 50th block may not have that kind of transactions. Let me choose a different one. I think this one also doesn't have that many transactions. Okay, so I just searched for the 4 lakh block in the Bitcoin network. Okay, so if you look at here, uh, you can actually see the transactions that have been included in this particular block. That is the block number 4 lakh 1, right? So you may be able to see a lot of transactions and the transfer of bitcoins from one address to another. So
Yes.
I hope you can understand these things, right? That this is the sender address, this is the receiver address, and all, and uh, there is some transfer of bitcoins from one address to the another address. Okay, so that is how the data is being persisted in a public blockchain, right? So if you look at these addresses, you may not be able to figure out who actually is owning these addresses, right? So maybe I might have an address and you wouldn't be able to figure out which is the address that I am owning, right? So in one way, you could think that there is some kind of privacy also that is available in uh, this network, because even with these addresses, you may not be able to trace back the owner of this address. Okay, so but there are some problems when you actually want to store some confidential data, right? So in the case of Ethereum network, you know that you can build decentralized applications, right? So what DApp does is, you might be building a DApp which actually stores some data onto the chain. Okay, so the data that you are going to store onto the chain will become available uh, to everyone. Like, it is in a public network, those who are able to access such a network will be able to view the confidential data that you have uh, ingested into the network, right? So that is something not the businesses aspire for. So they doesn't want such kind of privacy leakage in their data. So they won't be going for a public blockchain when it comes to data sensitive applications, right? So that is another reason why businesses are looking for uh, an alternative. Okay, so I mean, these are some thoughts that you can think about this. I'm just giving you some bits and pieces, so you can just note it down and you can think through about it at a later point of time, and you could actually figure out why we need a a private blockchain in place. So usually we won't call this as a private blockchain. Uh, we businesses usually call this as a DLT solution. Okay, so even Hyperledger, you won't directly call it as a private blockchain. You will say that Hyperledger DLT solutions. Okay, so what is DLT? DLT is nothing but distributed ledger technology. Fine. Okay, so that is a bit background about the need for a private DLT solution, and that is why uh, IBM has started working on a project called Hyperledger Fabric. Have you heard this term, Hyperledger Fabric? I
Yes,
will.
sir.
Yes. So what happened was, it was around 2015 or 16, I think. IBM has figured out the need for such a kind of uh, business blockchain or a private blockchain network that is suitable for businesses to adopt into their system. So that's why they have started with the project called Fabric. Okay, so initially there wasn't a term called Hyperledger. Initially, this Fabric was uh, called by some other name. I will come to that. But what happened was, the IBM has built a framework, and then this has been incubated onto the Linux Foundation. So this term might be familiar to you, right? Linux Foundation. So Linux Foundation is actually the organization or the community that actually maintains the Hyperledger projects right now. Okay, so under what they have done is, uh, they took the initiative and created a project termed or called Hyperledger, and under this Hyperledger they have incubated several projects onto it. So in this session we are actually going to see what are those projects and what are the peculiarities, or what are the advantages of such projects, right? So you will find a lot of projects and tools over here. So give me a second. I think I'm getting some message. Yeah. So what I'm saying is Hyperledger is actually the umbrella, and Linux Foundation is the community or the organization who is actually maintaining this Hyperledger project. Okay. So initially it was the Hyperledger fabric that has been incubated onto the Hyperledger umbrella. Okay, so these are, I mean, what you're seeing on the screen right now, these are some of the main reasons why this Hyperledger project come into place. So one is they actually want to reduce the cost and complexity of the blockchain adoption. So like I said, you can't have an energy intensive blockchain system in place and make that available to businesses, right? So it will again gives added cost, and that would again be a problem. Okay, and there are no open protocols and standards, interoperable protocols or standards between different blockchain system, because all these were created or developed by different communities, and these may not be interoperable, or there may not be any common standards or practices uh, uh, for the interoperability of these systems. So all these things were actually felt as hurdles by this Linux Foundation, and that's why they took the initiative to create this Hyperledger project. Okay, so what you're seeing right over here is these are the major projects that are currently under Hyperledger. So first one is Hyperledger Sawtooth, and we will come to it. I mean, we will try to understand what are these projects, not in a very great depth, but I will just try to introduce it to you, right? So that you can, at a later point of time, you can actually say to someone that these are the projects that are present in Hyperledger umbrella, right? So along with these projects, there are certain tools that are available as well. So what are those tools? I will come to that in a short while. Okay. So in today's session, we shift our focus more on Hyperledger Fabric, because I think your next two sessions will be mainly on the demo will be mainly on Hyperledger Fabric. So in order to give you a very basic idea, I will put more focus on Hyperledger Fabric in today's session, right? Okay, so these are some of the salient features, or the main features that you will find in any Hyperledger project. Okay, so the first one is it's a permissioned blockchain. So what do you mean by a permission blockchain? You already know this. I mean, you were speaking about this before, right? Permission. So the term literally says that
in permission, whenever a new user wants to enter in the network, then it should take permission.
Yeah,
without
exactly.
permission, he can.
Yes, correct. So the idea is very simple. You know that in a public blockchain, anyone can join and become a part of it, but that wouldn't be the case of a business or an enterprise blockchain network, right? In such a system, now they shouldn't allow anyone to come and join as a part of that network, right? So what they will do is there should be a mechanism. There should be a permission mechanism in which they would be able to restrict the participants in such a network. Okay, even even if they do it, the networks should still provide all the features that a DLT solution offers, right? So yeah, so this is the first thing. It should be a permission blockchain, and there shouldn't be any no miners or coins. So what does it mean? No miners or coins? Who are miners, and what is the coin that we have mentioned here? Any guess? What is the need of miner in a blockchain network?
Miner is used to find the most correct block.
Yeah, I mean, miner is the entity that solves
the block which is no, sorry. Actually means the miners are those who finds the block and the block, it validates that block, and then that block is added into the chain.
Yeah, exactly. So, in case of Bitcoin or Ethereum network, you know that miners do a heavy computational process and solve a puzzle in order to create a new block. Okay, and then this block is added onto the chain if it is a valid one. Okay, so like I said before, this is actually a very computationally intensive process, and due to this, the throughput of such a network is also very limited. Okay, so uh, in case of a public chain, uh, what is the reward that a miner is getting when they do this much amount of process? Why should someone waste their energy and find a block? What is, uh, I mean, I mean, if you are a teacher, you are getting paid for your service, right? So what is that being paid to a miner when they spend this much amount of energy in order to find a new block? Yeah, so there comes the concept of coins or the cryptocurrencies, say like Bitcoin or Ether. Okay, so these are the rewards that they are looking for. So for every block they mine, they will get some rewards, and these rewards will be credited to the miner's Bitcoin address or Ethereum address, and they could use that in the cryptocurrency market. So right now, you know that the Bitcoin has a value around 9 lakh rupees INR, right? So that is the value that these coins have at this moment. So, but there isn't any need for such a mechanism in an enterprise blockchain network, because the participants would be limited, and you don't want to have such a heavy computational process in place, and that would affect the throughput of the network. So that proof of work based consensus protocol may not be suitable, or is not suitable for an enterprise blockchain system. So that is why in most of the hyperledger projects, you might either see these kind of consensus protocols like PBFT, Raft, or even RBFT, like that. Okay, so these would be some consensus protocol that you will see in most of the Hyperledger projects. So our in today's session, we can't go deep into these protocols, because there was another session that actually explained how PBFT and Raft works and all. So if you haven't heard about these terms, just go through those recordings and try to get an understanding of these consensus protocols. So the sole idea here is the network should come to an agreement, and you need a consensus protocol in place in order to achieve that, right? So in case of public network, you have the proof of work. In case of Hyperledger project, you have uh, this kind of consensus protocol available to you. Okay, so I think you already know about BFT and all. BFT is nothing but Byzantine fault tolerance. So this is one of the concept that you will see a lot in computer science, not just in computer science, but in every aspect of our life. We actually have this concept, and we try to implement this, right? So every system should be Byzantine fault tolerant system. So that is how things are made in this world. Okay, so yeah, so now you have a modular architecture and pluggable consensus schemes. So this is another important feature that you will see in any Hyperledger project, where uh, the consensus protocols are pluggable. Okay, so at a later point of time, if you feel like you can actually you want to change the protocol to a different one, you can do that in a Hyperledger project. Okay, not in every project, but at least in some of the project, you will be able to have a pluggable mechanism where you could adopt any of these protocols in the system. Okay, but that is not the case with any public blockchain, where now there should be a community agreement in which if you want to change the protocol in such a system, so that would again take a lot of time, and it can't be done instantaneous, or uh, the time that will take for such a process will be huge. Okay, so now maybe in Ethereum session, you might have heard that Ethereum is now trying to move on to the proof of stake protocol. So that is another consensus protocol, and the community has agreed to this, and the work is still going on, right? So that is how it works in a public blockchain. But you can't afford such a latency or time limitation in case of an enterprise blockchain. Based on the requirements of the participants, the network administrator could actually plug another consensus mechanism if required. Okay, so I'm not saying that you can do it in every minute, but based on the requirement that the administrator feels, he may change the consensus, plug a new consensus protocol as per the requirement. Okay, so now let's directly jump on to Hyperledger Fabric and try to understand some of the features of Hyperledger Fabric. Okay, so please pay attention to this Hyperledger Fabric thing, because in the next two sessions you will be actually seeing uh, some demos on Hyperledger Fabric, right? So I will try to give you a very fair idea about how this what is the architecture of Hyperledger Fabric, and in the upcoming sessions you should be able to actually connect these concepts that I'm trying to teach you right now. Okay. Okay, so like I said before, this Hyperledger Fabric was initially built by IBM and another company named Digital Asset. Okay, so this was the first DLT that has been implemented, and it was around 2015 or 16, I think. And uh, then this solution, this Fabric solution, was incubated onto the Hyperledger project. So this is the first project that got incubated into the Hyperledger umbrella, and uh, and this is also one of the most popular general purpose blockchain platform that is available uh, to businesses. Okay, so let's see some of the features that is present in Hyperledger Fabric network or a Hyperledger Fabric platform, DLT framework. So first one is, like I said before, Fabric has certain features that offers you to do permissioning in the network. Okay, so Fabric is a permission network, and how this permissioning is managed and all, we will come to that in a short while. But just know that Fabric gives you an out-of-the-box feature in order to have, or in order to do a permissioned uh, based approach in your network. Okay, now there is another most important one called chain code can be written in standard programming language. Do you have any guess what is a chain code? Can you relate this term chain code with something that you have learned yesterday or day before yesterday?
It's a smart contract counterpart of.
Exactly. So, I mean, the lingo is bit different here. There is a bit difference in the term chain code and smart contract, but that is not a very big uh, uh, difference. That it's just a technical difference, and you will learn that in the next session. But just understand that now you can understand that chain code is nothing but the business logic that you are writing based on the requirement, right? So in case of Ethereum, you know that you will write the chain code in using Solidity, and that chain code is deployed onto the network, and you will interact with you will interact with that smart contract, right? So in Fabric, similarly, you can write your own smart contract, and that too, you can write that in Golang. Golang is one of the popular language that is used among by the distributed app developers. Then there is Node.js and even Java. Okay, so but in case of Ethereum, if you have learned that you might have understood that Ethereum is actually giving you an option called Solidity, right? I think there is one more option that they have currently released. I forgot the name, but you have Solidity at in place, and you should learn Solidity in order to write a smart contract in Ethereum, right? But another thing is, like, this Solidity language may not be that mature. So it is just released when Ethereum uh, network first bootstrapped, and the language hasn't come to a very good shape. The language is still getting evolved, right? So that is why enterprises can't afford such risk with new languages. So that's why Hyperledger Fabric uh, gives an option to write the chain code or the business logic in any of these languages. Okay, so these are some of the prominent languages and have a stable versions, and there are a lot of developers available right now in this world. So they don't have any big learning curve when they want to uh, write when they want to start writing a smart contract or a chain code in a Fabric network, right? So the another important feature is there is no cryptocurrency and mining. So like I was saying before, there isn't any need for any computational heavy computational process in such an enterprise blockchain network. The sole idea here is uh, we should be able to reach onto a consensus or reach onto an agreement with the state of the network. So instead of going for a computational intensive proof of work protocol, they have adopted certain other protocols that I was saying before, right? The PBFT, the RBFT, the Raft, and all. So those protocols would actually help them to achieve consensus, and that too in a less computational manner. Okay, so let me ask you another question. So if that is less computationally intensive, I mean the PBFT, RBFT, and all, why isn't that being adopted onto the public chain? Have anyone thought about it? Did you get my question?
Please repeat, sir.
Okay, I was saying that you have this PBFT or sorry, you have this PBFT, RBFT, and all in place, and you know that that is in computationally intensive. So why did why didn't the Bitcoin and Ethereum network adopted those protocols onto uh, their network? Why did they go for a computationally intensive protocol like proof of work?
I think Bitcoin is public blockchain. Uh,
Yeah, so mainly when they try to build a system, they want to achieve maximum efficiency and speed, right? So uh, when I said that these PBFT and all doesn't require a heavy computational process, why shouldn't they adopt such a protocol onto their network? Is there any reason for that? See, so what I'm trying to say is, uh,
It is more secure.
which one?
Proof of work and proof of stake.
I mean, we can't actually say it like that, because if we say that the other one are less secure, then that might create more problems with the credibility of these protocols, right? Like the businesses may not want to adopt such kind of less secure protocols, right? These protocols are also secure, but the problem over here is when I say about these PBFT, Raft, RBFT, and all, these will work only with a limited number of participants in the network. Okay, so you can't have a worldwide network using these kind of protocols. So even before 2009, so you know that Bitcoin has invented in the first come into its shape in 2009, right? So that is the year when this proof of work protocol came into place, and this is the first protocol that actually showed the world where how a network can withstand without a central authority, and that too using this consensus protocol. Okay, even before proof of work, this PBFT and all were there. I mean, PBFT was the broader topic here is distributed networks. Okay, so achieving agreement in a distributed network is a long-term research that is still happening, and PBFT, Raft, and all were actually I think PBFT were there before, even before 2009, but only after 2009 Bitcoin paved the way in which they actually showed that how a network, a worldwide network, can withstand even without a central authority. Okay, and that is why, even though they have showed it, it has a added disadvantage, and that is the heavy computational process that I was speaking before, right? There is a huge amount of energy that is being wasted as a part of maintaining that network. Okay, yeah. So now you have another important feature in Hyperledger Fabric, which is known as channels. Okay, so channels are something that is related to privacy. Okay, so I will come to that in a short while, but just understand that in Hyperledger Fabric, you will be able to create channels, and these channels are uh, something that is related to the topic called privacy. Okay, so how channels helps in achieving privacy and all, we will come to that in a short while. Okay, maybe if you look at this, I mean, you can assume that this is a small network. A, B, and C, three participants are there, and there is a common channel. So what you're seeing in this blue line, there is a common channel in between these uh, three people. Assume that this is a channel, and whatever things that happens in that channel will be known to everyone, right? Okay, so let me give you a real life scenario. Okay, so assume that uh, this let me put I will speak about some different participants here. Give me a second. So assume that there is a car manufacturer and there is a dealer. uh, Let there be two dealers. Okay, so they are so right now they have formed a network, and they are in a channel. Okay, they have a single channel in which whatever things that happens in between that channel will be known to everyone. Okay, my drawing skills are too bad, so I hope you got the point, right? I mean, what I'm trying to say. So there is a manufacturer and two dealers. Okay, so this car manufacturer, he wants to give uh, the cars in a discounted price to uh, to one of the dealer, and that data shouldn't be available to the next dealer, right? So you have a dealer two over here. So like I said before, if it is a single channel, what would happen is whatever things that happen in that particular channel will be known to everyone. Okay, so if the manufacturer gives a car to the dealer, and that data is being persisted onto this channel, what would happen is the other dealer will also come to know about it, and that would create a problem, because that would create the relation between, might tamper the relationship between the dealer and the manufacturer. So there comes the need for privacy in the network. Okay, so previously you were having uh, and even now also you have the option to create a private channel in between different entities. So right now there is one manufacturer and there is one dealer, and if they want to do a private transaction, they can create a channel and they can do the transaction in that particular channel. Okay, so on the more about the implementation side, you will learn in the upcoming session. Okay, so I'm just giving you the theoretical idea. So there will be channels, whatever that happens in a channel will be known to everyone. Okay, so in order to do private transactions, participants may have to create private channels. And uh, another recent important concept that is being introduced in Hyperledger Fabric is private data collections. Okay, so channel is one way in which you can achieve privacy. there is one more way in which you can achieve privacy, and that is known as private data collections, or PDC. Okay, so I mean, there is some limitations with channel, because uh, like when I say you have to create a channel when you want to make a private transaction, you might feel like that is very easy, but that is in the case. So assume that there are more number of participants in this network, and whenever they want to do a private transactions, uh, they have to create a channel and they have to do it. That isn't actually a very scalable approach, and that is why recently they have introduced this new concept called private data collections. Okay, so PDC is something that is new onto the Fabric, not that fresh, but it has been uh, only a short while that they have introduced the private data collections into the Hyperledger Fabric. So let's try to understand some of the components in Hyperledger Fabric. Okay, so you will learn about these components. I mean, you will see how these components are and all these things are started in a Fabric network in the demo. But right now, just understand that there are mainly you have three components. One is the membership service provider. Okay, so can you guess what does it do? I mean, membership service provider, from the name itself, it signifies something, right? So membership service provider is nothing but it will help you to, yeah, I mean, add user onto the network or add a participant onto the network. So like we said before, this is a permission network, and there should be some mechanism in which you would be able to add a participant onto the network. So that is why you have this membership service provider in place in order to do that. Okay, so it isn't just as simple like I say. There are some processes that you have to do when you uh, use this membership service provider to add a participant onto the network. But at least for now, this is enough. I mean, you just need to understand that there is a concept called MSP, and that is responsible for managing identities in a private network, right? And there is uh, peers. So peer is nothing but a node that you have seen in public blockchain. So in a public blockchain, there are different types of node. There are minor nodes, and there are normal nodes. So that is in the concept here. There are two types of peer here. One is endorser peer and another is committer peer. Okay, so peer is nothing but a node in a Hyperledger Fabric network, and these peer could assume these two roles. Either it could be an endorser peer and committer peer. So what is this endorsing peer and what is this committing peer do? I will explain it when I show you the transaction flow. Okay, so right now just know understand that there is a concept of peer in Hyperledger Fabric, and that is something similar to the node that you have seen in a public chain. And this peer can assume two roles. Either it can be a committer or it can be an endorser, or it can be both. Okay, so now you have ordering service. What is ordering service? Any guess? What would be the need for an ordering service in a Fabric network?
Transaction ordering?
Yeah, so I mean, if you try to relate it with the public blockchain, you have seen that the miner is responsible for mining a new block onto the network, right? So they will take care of the operations in picking the transactions, I mean, arranging it in a block, and then trying to solve the computational puzzle. What okay, I will come to that. What is HFC? Okay, I will explain that. But orderer or ordering service is nothing but uh, something, I mean, that will help you to create blocks in the network and distribute it onto all peers in the network. Okay, so in a public blockchain, this functionality or this service was mainly done by miners in the network. Okay, so ordering service is something that do the same purpose or same activity in Hyperledger Fabric. Okay, so this is the case of Hyperledger Fabric. So maybe in other projects you may not be seeing the same tool. I mean the ordering service. There might be different entities that is used to perform the ordering and all, right? Okay, so now what is this SDK? SDK HFC is nothing but Hyperledger Fabric. So you will actually use this SDK to interact with the Hyperledger Fabric chain code uh, in this network. Okay, so you if you remember, I was speaking about the chain code, right? So you will deploy this chain code onto the network, like you have seen in the Ethereum. You will deploy the chain code onto the network, and you should have some way in which you can interact with this chain code. And there comes the use of or the need of SDKs. Okay, so SDK is nothing but right now you have SDK available in Node.js and Golang. So you can use these SDKs if you want to interact with a chain code that you have deployed into the network. So you will learn about it. I mean, you will see a demo about how that interaction happens in the upcoming session. Okay, so you can also write a client application. I mean, a UI application that actually uses this SDK to interact with a blockchain network. Okay, so that is the sole idea here. These are the main components that you will see in Hyperledger Fabric. There will be POs, there will be a membership service provider, and there will be an ordering service. Okay, so when it comes to ordering service, so initially we had a couple of options. Like there were 3 types in which you can have this ordering service bootstrap. So one is the solo way. So this is mainly used in development mode. Okay, so whenever someone is developing an application using Hyperledger Fabric, they will use a solo ordering service uh, in order to create new blocks onto the network. So the one of the limitation of this solo thing is this is a single point of failure. Okay, so if the solo ordering server is service is down, then the network will come to a halt and no new blocks will get added onto the network. So now in usually in production based scenarios, previously they were using Kafka based ordering service. Okay, I mean, you don't have to worry much about it. I'm just giving you some bit technical ideas about how these ordering services are implemented. So in production scenarios, they usually use Kafka-based services. And recently, they are now using a Raft-based orderer. Okay, so Raft is another consensus protocol that they are used recently. So recent Fabric 2.0 and all supports Raft-based ordering service. So let me quickly check the time as well. Okay, so it's already 10:30 now, so I'm going a bit fast because I mean I will give you all the ideas, so don't worry. We have to cover a little more things, right? So yeah, like membership service provider that I was saying before, it actually holds the responsibility of giving identities to the participants in the network. Okay, so how these identities are being given? It is given by way of certificates. Okay, so digital signed certificates are released to these participants, and a participant can initiate a transaction only by using these certificates. Okay, so that is being released or given by the membership service provider with the help of a tool called Fabric CA. Okay, so just get this idea. Membership service provider will provide certificates to the members or the participants in the network. Okay, so when I say participants, it doesn't mean that there are only human elements in the network. All the participants, say for example, all the infrastructural components such as peers, orders, everything will get a certificates by its own, and these certificates are validated in the network before they perform any operation, because everything that happens in a Fabric network should be accountable. So no one can simply come and execute a transaction in the network, right? So that is why every possible entities in the network is given a certificate. So let's come to the peer part. So peer, actually, like I was saying, there are two types of peers. One is endorsing peer and the another one is committing peer. Okay, so what does this endorsing peer does and what does this committing peer does? Okay, so in order to understand that, you need to understand the transaction flow. So this is the transaction flow that I was speaking before. So I will come to this, but before I directly explain this transaction flow, I just need to explain about the idea behind the ledger. Okay, so ledger is the place where all the transactional data is being stored, right? So in Hyperledger Fabric, each ledger has two components. One is the world state, and the another one is the chain. So I mean, chain of events, chain of all the transaction logs will be present. Okay, so what is present in the world state and what is present uh, in the actual chain? So I will explain that with an example. Okay, so assume that I have bought, A has bought a car from person B. Okay, now this B has sold this car to another person D, and the D has given this car to, I mean, I bought this car from D. Okay, so what would happen is there is one asset called a car, and this car has been I mean, transferred to multiple people in the network, and these data were being stored in the Fabric network, right? So what would happen here is, uh, I mean, if I ask you the question, who is the current owner of this car? What would happen is you have to go through the entire transaction log, and you might have to figure out who is the current owner of this particular car. Okay, so that would be a problem when it comes to a very big query or a very big I mean, complex requirement. So what they have done is they have created something called world state. So it actually stores the current state of every assets. So when I say asset, here the asset is our car, right? So asset can be anything. So let it be a car, let it be a house, it can be a tangible or intangible asset. So what is the current state of this asset? So right now this asset is currently being owned by Praveen, right? So that is actually being stored in the world state. So whenever someone want to see the current status of a particular asset, they can come over here. The system can actually pick it from the world state quickly and give it to you. Okay, but if you want to see all the transaction log that is related to the particular car C, then you might have to go through the entire chain. I mean, you might have to parse the chain in order to fetch all the logs related to that particular asset. Okay, so that is how a ledger is being maintained in Hyperledger Fabric. Okay, so I mean, usually when you write or develop applications using Hyperledger Fabric, you may not be aware about these topics, but I am just giving you all these theoretical ideas so that maybe when you read it by yourself, you will see all these things and you shouldn't feel confused, right? So there is a concept of ledger in Hyperledger Fabric. This ledger is being divided into a world state and a chain, and the world state stores the most recent status of a particular asset, and the chain actually stores all the transaction logs that happened in the network. Okay, so now what would happen is, now let's try to understand what an endorsing peer and what a committing peer does. Okay, so we'll try to understand it by understanding the transaction flow. Okay, so here I have marked it using numbers. So you can actually see what are the steps involved in executing a transaction in a Hyperledger Fabric network. Okay, so the first step is you have to initiate a transaction onto the network. So that can be done using the SDK that I was speaking before, right? So you will be creating a transaction proposal, and this transaction proposal is actually initially given to an endorsing peer. Okay, so this is being given to an endorsing peer first. Okay, so what does this endorsing peer do? I mean, what is the functionality that endorsing peer does? It actually simulates that particular transaction. Okay, so say for example, so the next transaction that is being initiated endorsing peer. So how does the network know what is the endorsing peer and all? That is actually something dealt by the network configuration. So that is again bit technical, so I can't show you that right now. Maybe in the demo session you will be able to see all those things. Okay, so now you have a transaction, you have created a proposal, you have given that to an endorsing peer. This peer, what it will do is it will simulate this transaction. So it won't directly write into the ledger, but it will simply simulate the transaction. Okay, so simulation would, what it will do is the owner of the car C would be changed to the new owner, like that is the simulation that it does. Okay, and this response will be given back to the endorsed response will be given back to the client, I mean the SDK. Okay, now what this SDK does is it will packages it will package that endorsed response and give that as a transaction. I mean, it will submit that packaged thing onto the ordering service. Okay, so ordering service I was speaking before, right? There is uh, something called a Solo based ordering service or a Kafka based ordering service. Let it be anything. Okay, so the simple idea here is uh, the endorsed response is being collected and it is being packaged and given as a transaction to the ordering service. Okay, so ordering service, based upon the configuration that we have set for the ordering service, it will create blocks out of the transactions that we give, and that transactions will be finally I mean the blocks will be finally delivered to the committing peers. Okay, so these are the peers that actually write it onto the ledgers. In the endorsing peer only simulates the transactions, and the committing peers, what it does is committing peers will actually write or commit the transaction onto the ledger. I know this is, I mean, bit difficult to understand in the first go, but I mean, maybe once you see the demo as well, you might be able to relate it. Okay, so this is actually the transaction flow. So one thing I forgot to mention here is the enrollment part, where, like I said before, every entity in the network should get an identity from the membership service provider, and that is actually being done by the process of enrollment. Okay, so only with that certificate, this client can actually perform these transaction initiation operations and all, right? Without a valid identity in the network, no one will, every transaction that comes from an invalid identity will be discarded by the network. Okay, so any queries? It's already 10:41 right now. I will quickly show you the other projects that are currently available in uh, Hyperledger umbrella. Okay, so the next important one is Hyperledger Sawtooth. Okay, so this is again it was developed by Intel in 2016, And this is also another kind of general purpose blockchain framework that can be used by businesses uh, to build their own private networks, right? Uh, but from my experience and what we have understood, so truth is in that, I mean, there aren't that many ready-made tools that is available, like in Fabric. Uh, so tooth is, so tooth is isn't that much matured. There is, but there are still projects that uses Hyperledger Sawtooth for their blockchain initiatives. So Sawtooth has contributed onto the development of Hyperledger Sawtooth, and this one also has several features that it offers. So multiple language support. Even this one support Ethereum contracts as well. So this is one feature that you may not see uh, in Hyperledger Fabric. So Ethereum contract called Solidity. So there is one way in which you can deploy that code onto a Sawtooth network as well. Okay, so that is another important feature that Sawtooth offers. Then here comes the most important topic in Hyperledger Sawtooth, which is nothing but the consensus that is being used in POET. In Hyperledger Sawtooth. So it is nothing but the POET protocol. So POET is nothing but a proof of elapsed time consensus protocol, and you have other options as well. I mean, you just don't need to use POET. Maybe you can use a Raft or PBFT or even a dev mode consensus protocol if you are simply doing a development activity. So POET is one of the most popular protocol that is being used uh, in Hyperledger Sawtooth. Okay. So these are some of the main components that is available in Hyperledger Sawtooth, which is nothing but there is a Sawtooth network. So like a Fabric network, there will be a Sawtooth network. There will be a transaction processor that actually executes the business logic that you have written. So this is somewhat you can correlate this with the chain code that you have learned before, but it is in exactly the same. There is some differences with uh, transaction processor in Sawtooth and the chain code in Fabric, but I mean, for now, for a basic understanding, this would be fine. I mean, this is the place where you will write the business logic, and transaction processor will actually take care of executing those business logic. So validator is nothing but you can compare that with the orderer that you have seen before. So client is nothing but a application or client that initiate transaction onto the network. So this is the basic workflow that you will see in a Hyperledger Sawtooth network. So these are actually the nodes, and one node is expanded. I mean, to show you all the components. So client will actually initiate transaction onto the network using some REST APIs that has already been built. Okay, so to provide some out of the box REST APIs which can be used to initiate transactions onto the network. Okay, so validator will validate the transaction, and it will actually execute, I mean, it will delegate the transaction onto the transaction processor. So this is the place that where the code execution or the business logic execution happens. And once it is done, the consensus engine will take care of achieving the consensus in this network. Okay, so here things are in bit complex, but if you notice here, you may not be able to see any dedicated tool for the membership management or sort of that, right? So Sawtooth isn't, there might be any tools recently available, I'm not sure, but uh, the community is also not that much very active when it comes to Hyperledger Sawtooth these days. Okay, but still there is work happening on Hyperledger Sawtooth, and still there are projects that is being developed in Hyperledger Sawtooth. So then you have some other projects as well. So mainly there you have Hyperledger Indy, Aroha, Burrow, Grid, and Basu. Okay, so all of them having is mainly responsible for uh, can someone confirm? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, so the two framework that I was just speaking before, which is Hyperledger Fabric and Hyperledger Sawtooth, they are somewhat kind of a general purpose a blockchain framework, because based on the type of use case that you have, say let it be a supply chain based use case, uh, or a healthcare based use case, or a education based use case. um, so based on the use case that you have, you can choose any of those general purpose blockchain platform and implement the solution out of it. Okay, but Hyperledger Indy isn't such a general purpose blockchain. Its main motive is to uh, decentralized identities. Okay, so you should know about, I mean, you can simply explore this particular term SSI. So SSI is nothing but self sovereign identity. So the notion here is uh, the whole control of the identity will be given to the user itself, and you are not giving your identity to any third party or so if I give you an example, you know that how much the data is being given to Google and Facebook every day, right? So instead of uh, giving the control of your data to someone, it is you who is actually having the power to control your identity. Okay, so that is the main notion behind SSI. And where its application comes is uh, say for example, uh, when you create an account in Facebook, okay, they will actually ask for your date of birth, right? So you would simply give your date of birth and that's it. I mean, they have that data with them, right? So you are simply exposing or giving out your personal information to a third party, and they could actually make use of it. And uh, anyway, data is kind of an oil, right? So they can gain huge amount of advantage from the data that you share. But Facebook, what they actually says is they only want to verify that you are above 18 years or not, right? Okay, so is there a mechanism in which you can prove to Facebook that you are above 18 years old and you don't want to share uh, without sharing your exact date of birth to Facebook? Okay, so that is the notion behind self-sovereign identity. It is you who will be controlling your data, and you will only share a limited amount of information to a third party as and when required. Okay, so you just want to share the information that you are just 18 years old, and you don't want to share your uh, date of birth to Facebook. I mean, these are some I mean notions, I mean, that you can think of. So currently Hyperledger Indy is such a platform where you'll be able to create self-sovereign identity, and you can actually uh, I mean, right now there are some applications that is being built on Hyperledger Indy to achieve this SSI features. Okay, so you can explore about it. What Hyperledger Indy does, mainly it focuses on decentralized identities. So I will quickly go to our next one, which is nothing but Hyperledger Iroha. Okay, so this is one project. Again, it got incubated onto the Hyperledger umbrella in 2016. So what it mainly does is it gives you an out-of-the-box framework to develop mobile-based blockchain applications. Okay, so the you can actually do the same with a general purpose blockchain framework as well. But when you have something that is being created out of the box, then that would save a lot of time, right? So that is why Hyperledger Iroha came into place, and it mainly focuses on projects related to asset and identity management. So mainly Fabric, it was developed by IBM and all, but Iroha was mainly built by Soramitsu, and they have a production release right now. But when you look into the longer, very bigger landscape, you won't see much projects that actually uses Iroha. But there are still some areas, some startups and all, they actually uses Iroha uh, for certain use cases. Okay, another important feature is this is mainly built using the C++ language. So this is actually an advantage for developers who already know C++, right? So there isn't a very much learning curve in the development using Hyperledger Iroha. So that is in the case with an Ethereum network and all. You have to learn a specific language when you want to implement a smart contract, right? But in case of Iroha, if you are a C++ developer, if you already know that, you could actually write contract. I mean, you could actually program in Hyperledger Iroha using uh, the language that you already know. Oh, again, this Iroha has a 4-layer architecture where there is the storage level. So this is nothing but, so I mean, this is actually developed by a Japanese company, right? So some of these terms might seems a bit familiar to a Japanese term. So they call the storage level or the ledger level as the Amatsuchi. Okay, and even the API level, the first layer of the architecture where the entry point comes in. So you will actually interact with the network from the Torai. So this is again another kind of Japanese term that they use. So this is nothing but a gateway where you will actually interact with the network, and then you have a peer interaction level layer where it actually manages the network as well as the consensus in the network, and then you have the business logic level. Okay, so there is, again you have a simulator which actually simulates the transaction, and finally validator validates it and commits the transaction onto the storage level. Okay, so synchronizer is nothing but something that will help you to um, synchronize the ledger or synchronize the node with other peers in the network. So one thing you should understand is you are hearing a lot of these architectural terms and jargons in this session. So the sole idea here is just try to understand that there is this private blockchain in place. There are several projects under Hyperledger umbrella, and each of these projects, some of them have their own dedicated purpose, like Hyperledger India and Iroha and all. But there are general purpose blockchain as well that can be suited to our needs, and these have different style of architecture by their own, and they use different consensus protocols, and it is actually a pluggable consensus protocol, so you can actually plug anything that you want as per the requirement. Again, in Iroha, you will see a new consensus protocol, which is nothing but YAC. So they call it as yet another consensus. So mostly these consensus, the sole idea is just they somehow want the network to come to an agreement, and that is why this consensus protocol is used. So those who haven't attended the consensus protocol session, I would request you to go and watch that video and try to understand why this consensus algorithm is, I mean, as in general, why the consensus protocols are very important in case of a blockchain network. So these are some areas where Iroha is being used. So it is being used for digital identity management and supply chain management. So the sole idea here is you can use it for mobile. Mainly, you have out of the box tools available for the mobile application development using Hyperledger Iroha. Then you have Burrow, Grid, and Besu. So Burrow is nothing but a permissioned blockchain that has been built using the Ethereum virtual machine. So what is EVM? What is Ethereum virtual machine? Anyone have any idea? What is an Ethereum virtual machine? Yeah, I think in yesterday's session you might have seen that.
Machine on which the bytecode is run.
Yeah, I mean, that is the place where you will actually execute the smart contract and do all the activities, right? That is where you will use Ethereum virtual machine. So without an EVM, an Ethereum network is nothing, right? So EVM provides all the capabilities to all the nodes in the Ethereum network. So what these people have done is, those who have architected this Hyperledger Burrow, what they have done is they took this EVM and uh, they reprogrammed it in a way like they made it in a permissioned way. Okay, so now you have an Ethereum virtual machine, permissioned Ethereum virtual machine in place, and they have tweaked it a bit in order to achieve features that enterprise desires. Okay, so again, I mean, Barrow is in something that is being widely used. It was just a project uh, that was started in 2017, and I'm not sure like whether any company is currently using it or not. But that is the idea. I mean, they took the features that is available in Ethereum network and they made it in a permission way, and now you have Ethereum level features available to you in the network. So similarly, you have something called Hyperledger Grid. So I think this one is still in incubation. We don't have a production release yet. So it is mainly meant for supply chain management and all. And what are the sole important features of this particular project? We are yet to know. But just remember that this is also one of the project that is being available in Hyperledger umbrella. Again, you have Hyperledger Besu. So Besu is something interesting. Like this was initially, I mean, developed by Consensus, I think. So that is one of the prominent name in the blockchain field. It's not Consensus, it is Consensus. I mean, that's a company name. So they have actually returned an Ethereum client in Java. So if you remember in the yesterday session, you might have heard this term called Geth, right? Go Ethereum client. So Geth is something that is written in Golang. So what happens in Hyperledger Besu is they have built a client uh, written in Java, and again this offers the permission features. I mean, they have made it in a way like that offers permission features to an enterprise, so that enterprise can start building apps on top of it. Besu and Burrow, somewhat you might feel like both are similar, but it is in when it comes to the implementation part, you will understand the real difference between Hyperledger Barrow and Hyperledger Besu. Okay, so these are some of the projects. These are the projects that is currently being available in Hyperledger umbrella. There are also some tools and libraries. It's kind of some add-on tools, right? That is available to you when you deal with those projects. So first one is Hyperledger Caliper. This is something that is used to test the performance of a network, a Hyperledger network. So you could actually calculate the TPS of a Hyperledger network by using this Hyperledger Caliper tool. Okay, so Hyperledger Celo is another tool that will help you to deploy and manage a network under the Hyperledger umbrella. So you can actually deploy a Hyperledger Fabric network using Hyperledger Celo. Maybe you can deploy a Hyperledger Sawtooth network using Hyperledger Celo. So this is another tool in which actually saves a lot of time, where you can deploy and manage a network using this particular tool. Now you have Hyperledger Explorer. Okay, so what is Hyperledger Explorer? I mean, I have already shown you something called a Bitcoin Explorer, right? So where you can actually go and see all the transactions that happens in a Bitcoin network, right? Similarly, in Hyperledger, you have a tool called Hyperledger Explorer, and this tool can be integrated with any of the projects that you have seen before, and you would be able to view the transactions that has happened in that network. Okay, so now you have I mean several other projects as well. Hyperledger Quilt. So this is nothing but a tool that can be used when it comes to the interoperability between larger systems. So if, like I said, you have different projects that is available in the Hyperledger umbrella, and if you want to make a solution that is interoperable between two different projects, then you may use this Quill tool to make that happen. So Ursa is nothing but another tool that can be used to manage all the cryptographic libraries that is being used in your project. Okay, so Hyperledger Ursa mainly focuses on the cryptographic aspects of your uh, Hyperledger project. Aries is again something that will help you to create transmit and store verifiable digital credentials. Say, for example, it will help you to create wallets, and these wallets could actually hold some digital credentials. Say, for example, your driving license or your election ID. So these kind of digital credentials could actually be stored in a wallet built using Hyperledger Redis, and this can be used. Most of the use cases that currently being seen is there is a combination between Hyperledger Indy plus this Aries. Okay, so these are some thoughts. I mean, some areas where Aries can contribute. Like I said, in the driving license and the election ID, all this could actually be stored in a wallet managed by Hyperledger Aries. So Transact is nothing but it actually tries to standardize the smart contract development in the Hyperledger projects. So right now, you know that there are multiple ways in which you can write chain code or smart contracts in several Hyperledger projects. So in order to make these smart contracts interoperable or create a common standard, you could actually use this Hyperledger Transact tool in order to do that. So these tools are actually kind of a recent addition to the Hyperledger umbrella. So it's like still I don't know like whether it is currently being used in production, but I mean you can see some samples or demos in online if you wish. Avalon is something that you will use for off-chain computation. Okay, so off-chain, I don't know whether you might have heard this term, but you don't have to do every computation within the chain. Say, for example, in case of, if you take the example of Ethereum, when you do a computation process within the chain, that would take a long time. I'm not speaking about the mining part, but let's say in the smart contract that you have written, there is a step that requires a lot of computational process. Instead of doing that and that process in that chain itself, you can achieve you can still achieve speed by using off-chain computations. Okay, so just keep note of this term, what is off-chain computation, and you will then understand the importance of off-chain computational resource in a blockchain system. Okay, so Avalon is something that offers an off-chain computational system for all the Hyperledger projects that is available under Hyperledger umbrella. So finally, you have again Cactus. So this is something that you can use to integrate a Hyperledger project with other projects. Say, for example, you have Corda and Quorum and all. So this can be used as a tool that will help in integration between other blockchain projects. So any questions? I know, I mean, at the end, it was a bit hectic for you guys, but I hope you got a fair idea about what are the projects and tools that are being available under Hyperledger umbrella. So in the upcoming session, you will actually get more focus on Hyperledger Fabric, and you will understand how a smart contract, how a chain code is written, and how it is actually being deployed, and how you can interact with such a chain code in the network. Any questions? Do you have any queries? Okay, Sandeep.
Hello. 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 Thank you, Praveen. Actually, I think our participants are waiting for the hands-on session.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think they will understand more
Exactly. Yep.
because you give a fair idea about the things, what we are expecting, what we will learn in the hands-on session. Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Okay.
So I would like to call upon Vidyan sir to express his opinion about this session. Hello, sir. Vidyan sir.
Hello, I'm audible, Sundar.
Yeah, yeah.
Hi all. Praveen sir has taken us to a very wide tour on Hyperledger, and actually I am very new to this blockchain area as it is, and it was from the session it was very evident that how vast the topic is, otherwise the area is, a huge scope is there for research, and it was just like the class was just like attending or reading a very good survey paper. I think has covered a huge area in Hyperledger. It was very the foundation level course. He has given a very good theoretical foundation about this topic. It will be helpful for us to handle our hands-on session also. Thank on behalf of the participants, I thank Praveen sir for a very nice session on very simple and nice presentation on this Hyperledger topic. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
So thank you, Praveen, for
Yeah.
coming here and presenting a session.
Okay.
Okay,
So
thank you.
thank you all for joining. Thank you. Have a
Oh,
great day.
thank you. So next session is at 11:30.
Okay. Okay.
Participants, you can go and come back.